All right, well, the Andrews government, this taxpayer-funded inquiry into its bungled hotel quarantine program, well, it's blown out to costing taxpayers in Victoria nearly $6 million. Now, you'll say, gee, that's a lot of money, isn't it? And it is a lot of money. It's a lot of money to get a whole lot of I don't knows and I don't recall and I don't remembers. So what are you really paying for? Well, it's not just that. There's a lot more than that. Every minister, secretary and department, all of them, most of them, have their own legal teams. And most of the legal teams operate with the following. One senior QC paid anywhere from $10,000 to $25,000 a day, plus one junior barrister, around $3,000 to $5,000 or roundabouts a day. One solicitor at partner level, often paid between $500 or so to $900 an hour. And one solicitor level, this is senior associate, couple of junior solicitors, so there's another three, anywhere between $220 and $440 per hour. So roughly per day, anyone working on this hotel quarantine, a minister or an official fronting it, they have their own legal team that costs you, the taxpayer in Victoria, about $30,000 to $35,000 per day. And there's multiple of these teams. Chris Merritt, he's the Vice President of the Rule of Law Institute of Australia, and he joins me now from Sydney. All right, Chris, I just ran through that sort of, bill for taxpayers in Victoria. But let me make it very clear, we're talking about not just the days that they're in the inquiry. Of course, these $30,000 a day bills are coming in for the days they're in their office and they're writing submissions and they're doing all that work. And this has been going on since, July.
Mm. Yeah, I doubt whether Victoria is getting value for money, Peter. The terms of reference are so narrow, it's hard to avoid the conclusion that they've been designed to focus attention on something that's rather the most anodyne parts of this catastrophe. You've got to remember what's going on could give rise to a multitude of legal issues. There's already litigation, class actions on foot, and it's not just negligence over the way the hotel quarantine issue was handled, but the real issue is whether anyone's conduct could give rise to liability under Victoria's industrial manslaughter legislation, as well as the big issue of whether the lockdowns were declared for an improper purpose. If they were, they're unlawful. By that, what I'm getting at is that the inquiry has not looked at the level of preparedness in the health bureaucracy in Victoria. What I'm getting at is contact tracing. If inadequate contact tracing meant the government knew it was incapable of coming to grips with this and locked down the state for that purpose, for its own inadequacies, that's not permitted. That's not a permitted purpose under the health and welfare legislation, which is the ostensible basis for the lockdowns. The inquiry is avoiding these big issues. Those issues are going to be overtaken by litigation in the High Court and various other courts that is already on foot. The inquiry is going to be made completely irrelevant unless it's reconvened, unless witnesses are asked to address conflicting testimony, and whether real issues. For example, Lizzie Ratcliffe, the Premier's Chief of Staff, hasn't been asked a question, hasn't been called to give testimony. She was the gatekeeper in the Premier's office. We are aware that the government of Victoria was effectively centralised in the Premier's office. The Chief of Staff of the Premier, therefore, should have known exactly what was going on, and the inquiry hasn't called her. It's almost as incredible as the failure to investigate what you investigated, which is the missing 6 minutes. What happened in the missing 6 minutes? It's astounding.
Yeah, and look, Chris, I can't believe that there wasn't more pressure put on the Premier until last Friday to turn up these phone records. I mean, I've been involved, at least in the side of federal government, on royal commissions. I understand how extensive the powers are to compel witnesses and to get hold of documents like phone records. This Board of Inquiry in Victoria, under the Victorian Inquiries Act, has none of those powers, and I think, I have to say politically, deliberately so. But even with the powers it's got, and I led off with this tonight, I mean, I've watched so much of the testimony and I'm now reading all the transcripts again. There are points where I'm surprised counsel assisting weren't doing more to assist. You know, I can't see sometimes why they didn't pursue a point, why things weren't cross-referenced. And I have to say, now that you've got Chris Eccles resigning from the public service, the #1 bureaucrat in Victoria, because he's suddenly been found to have basically misled the inquiry due to a failure to remember or recall that phone call. You've got Jenny Makakos having left now. You've got serious questions about recanting evidence from Andrew Crisp. I mean, surely, you know, you're a legal expert. Why on earth aren't they calling all of them back and really going hard on the differences in the evidence and the witness statements?
Look, I don't want to overstate this, but anyone who's as old as I am can remember what happened in Watergate, and it's not the actual problem, it's the cover-up. And we're seeing missing 6 minutes, and Eccles needs to be put in a witness box and asked who he spoke to before he made those phone calls. Jenny Makakos and the Premier, similarly, the conflicting testimony that they've given needs to be resolved. It can't be allowed to just simply stand. It's got to be addressed.
No, and Chris, just on this point too, you know very well, you know, ministers get sworn in, they get sworn into a series of acts that they administer, and then public servants have their own responsibility for legislation. The idea that public servants, and I've seen the documents in evidence in the inquiry, they're publicly available. You've got $30 million contracts for 3 months' work signed by individuals who now say, I can't remember who told me that was authorised. I just don't find that tenable.
I sympathise. I agree with you entirely. It just doesn't ring true. Somebody gave the okay. This is...
Of course they did.
Of course they did. It needs to be got to the bottom of. But look, they need to do this now. If there's a change of government, the Coalition has said we will have, or the Liberal Party has said we will have a Royal Commission. That will get to the bottom of it. So if the current government doesn't do it, the next government, if they are elected, almost certainly will. Victoria will get some answers.
Let's say, correct, this is not going to go away. Chris Merritt, thank you as always for your time.
Quite okay.